All right, you all set?
Yes, I'm all ready.
All right. So hello, everyone. My name is Cassandra Collette, and I'm the Education Specialist here at the Key West Art and Historical Society. Thank you for joining us today for David Schmidt's talk on the legacy of Franklin Roosevelt's WPA in Florida. The program you're about to see is supported by Florida Humanities, the state affiliate of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Florida Humanities funds and coordinates public humanities programs and publications that explore the people, places, and ideas that shape our state. In addition to this Florida Talks program, Florida Humanities provides grant funding to cultural institutions, brings traveling Smithsonian exhibits to rural and underserved communities, and publishes Forum, an award-winning magazine. Private contributions are critical to sustaining the programs of Florida Humanities. For more information on the organization and how to support it, visit floridahumanities.org. So during the talk, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them into your text box, and we will answer as many of those questions as we have time for at the end. We've also included, I will put that on here, a donate button at the top of the screen. If you can, please consider making a donation. Any amount will help us continue to offer these virtual programs for free. I also want to say thank you to everyone who made a donation during our last DSS or happy hour. So our speaker today is David Schmidt. He is currently the curator of the Florida Civilian Conservation Corps Museum at Highland Hammock State Park in Sebring. Before that, he taught for 37 years, focusing on United States history, geography, and special education. David holds 2 master's degrees from Ball State University in special education and United States history, and did additional study at Michigan State University, Indiana University, and Bowling Green State University. Welcome, David. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. It's really good to be here. Hopefully, this is my actual very first streaming presentation, so hopefully it'll all go well. It, of course, saved me the drive all the way to Key West, which, as much as I love Key West, that's something that I really don't enjoy, especially when I have to go down and come right back. So let's go ahead and get started. First slide, I'd like to make a note to all of you to not confuse the topics that I'm going to be talking about today, which are the WPA works projects, things that were actually built in Florida. There are also a huge number of other projects that went on during the WPA period in all across the United States. There was an arts project, a music project, a theater project, writers and historical record survey. That's a whole nother presentation, and so please don't get that confused if you've stumbled across some of those things in your background reading. First of all, the WPA, Works Progress Administration, or the Works Progress Projects Administration, was the largest and most ambitious of the New Deal programs. There were many, many millions of unskilled workers who lost jobs during the Depression, and this was FDR's attempt to get those people to work and get money in their pockets and back into the economy. The goal, as you can see on this slide, was to provide one paid job in households where the breadwinner was chronically unemployed. Almost every community of any size received a park, a post office, school, bridge, or some other community improvement. And we're going to be looking at some of those that were built during this period of time in Florida, and for the most part, they're all still here and still being enjoyed and still being used. Here's some numbers. Harry Hopkins, who historians of the WPA era will know well, directed this program. How one man could undertake this is beyond belief. Hopkins was actually a social worker, went to Grinnell College in Grinnell, Iowa, and he drifted into FDR's orbit in New York when he was in New York, and FDR found him. He actually was director of their social programs, and then FDR picked him up and learned how adept he was at doing things. The unfortunate thing is Hopkins got sick during FDR's last term, and he died literally right after FDR did. Note that in 1938, during the peak year, employed about 3 million men and women, and there was also a youth program those are for youth that weren't in the Civilian Conservation Corps. As a matter of fact, one of the state parks up at Olino was actually built partially by the Youth Administration Corps. 100% of the costs of the project was not borne by the government. About, as you can see, 10 to 30% of the cost came from the local communities that were receiving the projects, either by donating lands, trucks, material. The other thing that they also paid for is, note that the focus of this program was on unskilled or untrained workers. A lot of local communities, one of their contributions were skilled workers in the building trades. So that brought money locally into local families in the communities too. And those people also were able to do training so that after the Depression was over, FDR was really big on making sure that after the Depression was gone, he knew it wasn't going to last forever, that the people who came out of it had skills and training that applied not just to this program, but also the Civilian Conservation Corps. Okay, WD, there are actually, this is wrong, I just checked today, the New Deal Network, which I'll hook you up with in the end of this program, reports now 209 projects in Florida. Some of those don't exist anymore. We'll talk about one of those. Efforts to get those projects were really fierce because it brought big money back into the local community. The mayor of Sarasota is a classic example of how much people went out of their way to get those projects. Ernest Smith, up until 1935, they had gotten a few projects, but he was all ready to go. And there's a great picture of him with his suitcase packed, standing next to a train, and he's all ready to jump on board and go to Washington, D.C. and get some money for Sarasota. Please excuse my dogs. I have 3 of them and stuff's going on outside, so we'll try to speak over them. FDR was really good about getting money wherever it was, and so there were also, just to rehash, a lot of FDR's programs went by acronyms, obviously WPA. They were called FDR's alphabet programs, and here's a list of some of the ones. He really, really liked to use money from the Federal Emergency Relief Administration. And when we talk a little bit about the programs, the buildings that you guys have in Key West, a lot of those were actually paid for by FARA funds rather than WPA funds. Nice poster there from Dry Tortugas National Park. I've tried to throw in as much of the posters. The National Arts program that went on with the WPA did a lot of posters and stuff for different programs all over the country, and this was one for in the style of that for Dry Tortugas National Park. We'll talk about that too, as a matter of fact. Okay, first of all, last time I did this was up in Hernando County, before COVID hit, and this was a building that I actually presented in this building. The local historical society had purchased this building. It had been an elementary school and had been built by the WPA in the 40s, and they were in the process of rehabbing it. Unfortunately, it didn't have the air conditioning on, and the night that I presented, it was incredibly humid, and a giant thunderstorm came whipping through, so it was sort of interesting to that. But note, this is a relatively new picture, rather recent picture, and it's still, building's still in pretty good shape. They were had been working on it, but most of the stuff was infrastructure on the inside, HVAC and things like that. So that'll give you an idea as you look at these buildings. Most of these things are 80 years old, and so they're still in pretty good shape, and I think it speaks to the efforts that were put into constructing these at the time that they were built. Crystal River, I've thrown this in not only because it's a WPA building, but because this will show you, along with the post offices, that there was a standard plan for a lot of the structures that went into the buildings that the WPA did. This is was the town hall until 1970 in Crystal River, and then it was turned into the Coastal Heritage Museum. This was the standard plan for small towns for a building that could be used as a town hall. It could be used as a fire station. It could be used as a jail. The plan for this actually has cells in the back of it, and keep your police car there in the garage. The thing that's very interesting about this is I have another program that I do about the big WPA programs, the arts and cultural programs, but I sort of throw in at the end some of the buildings. So I have a picture of a building out in Iowa. It's either Iowa or Kansas, same plan, but done in granite, cut granite, or cut limestone, one of the two. And it's exactly the same plan, and it's actually still in use as the local police station, and they keep their police car there in the garage. So as you're going to see, especially when we get into the post offices,
Hi guys, we seem to be having some technical difficulties, so I'm going to go ahead and give David a call, and then I will be right back. Thank you.
okay, I'm back. I think something happened to my internet. So if somebody could give me a heads up to let me know that we're back on here. Here we go. I think my internet went out. Sometimes that happens during the day. Okay, let's go on and continue, and I'll just speed it up a little bit here. Okay, here's Daytona Beach. For those of you who ever get up from the Keys to Daytona Beach, this is the famous Daytona Beach band shell that was built in the late 30s. 10 months, please note the date, September of 36 to July. Alan McDonough was a very prolific architect in the area, and he designed that whole complex there. He also designed a couple other buildings that we're going to look at too. At the time, it was the world's largest band shell and seated 5,000 people. Still a concert venue for some of those, fake Beach Boys and some of those other groups like that. It was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1999. Here's a lovely 1930s-ish, Fordish postcard and an aerial view showing the venue still being used. Notice picnickers in the park that connects to this. I've never seen this, so great story. One time I was doing this presentation, and out of the audience came a sigh from a lady, And I said, yeah. And I said, you have a story? And she goes, oh yeah. She says, when I was a little kid, she goes, I used to tap dance, and our tap dance recital was there when I was 8 years old. So I'm glad that happened, and I hope that this brings back some memories to some of you people. There's the famous clock dedicated to the mayor of Daytona Beach at the time. Well, and here's another building. This is in Ormond Beach. There, notice that the fire station was a big deal. Fire station, police station, things like that. This is the one that was built in Ormond Beach, and the same McDonough, the same architect that designed the Daytona Beach band shell, designed this building. This was once again, look at the build time. Took a little longer here. I think the issue was there was another WPA project that was going on. Granada Avenue was being done, and so they had to redo this. Note the flashy car, if you can look really close, in between the fire truck and the police car. It turns out that was actually donated by Fred Dana Marsh, who was a local artist. This is what the building looks like now. It's been repurposed several times. I was actually in Ormond Beach doing a presentation. This was the rebuild when it was a lawyer's office. It's now as of 2 years ago, it was a community office for like wraparound services for families and children, and a lot of different social service agencies in Ormond Beach. But beautiful, it was actually a beautiful building. It's held up incredibly well, given the fact that it's been a whole bunch of different things, museum and several other things like that. New Smyrna Beach, this is something very interesting that a lot of people don't know about. This isn't a building program, but actually a works program that was done. I actually ran into a relative of this, Zelinus Wilson Sweet, while I was doing a presentation up in Lake City, I think it was, and his grandmother, I believe, and she had participated in this sewing program. This picture is actually not from Florida, it's from Texas, but all you had to do is the local people had to come up with the space, and then the government sent in sewing machines, and then once again you went locally and got local people to come in and teach sewing or come in and sew, and then they would either make things. This Mrs. Sweet actually created the city flag of New Smyrna, but they also would patch clothes. As you can see, we patch anything using the acronym WPA. They would actually patch clothes, and then those would be given away, or they would actually make stuff. So there were several sites in Florida where they had these sewing centers. Post offices. This is the most common structure that was put up during the WPA's time in Florida. This is the Sebring post office, as I call it. It's the standard issue WPA post office. When I first moved to Sebring and I didn't know where the post office was, I was cruising around downtown, and this building, of course, is almost identical to the post office in the town I lived in Indiana, except there it was built out of good old Indiana limestone with a flat roof. And so I got out of my car, walked in, and discovered that no, it wasn't the post office, but the police station. It had been purchased by the city and then repurposed. But this is pretty much the standard one for the mid-sized town, Sebring size, county seat size, with the door and the window on either side. There was some local elements thrown in. This one obviously is stucco with a tile roof. You're going to see them same design, but a little different finish to the outside. One of the things that you got, if you got a building, a post office, or you got a school, is you also got a piece of art. And this, do not confuse this program, which was actually directed by the Treasury Department. It was called the Murals Project, with the arts project that is another WPA project, which is artists just painting and selling paintings. Anyway, but this is the mural that was in the post office. It's now in the Sebring Library. It's called Prehistoric Florida. And for those of you who have possibly been to Highlands Hammock State Park, you can actually drive through the Mesic flatland there, and it pretty much still looks like that. It's cabbage palms and stuff. And in the past, during the CCC era, when part of the park was being built, they actually found mastodon tusks there. So we know that Knight did his research, and so that this is actually the creatures that would have been found in the prehistoric era in Sebring. Unfortunately, the tusks weren't taken care of, and they sort of deteriorated. But in the same dig, they also came up with a giant tortoise shell, which we still have. Knight was one of the most famous, I guess you could call him, dinosaur artists in the United States. How we got him in Sebring to paint this, I have no idea. His art is literally all over the world. People from the Midwest, his paintings are in the Field Museum in Chicago. As a matter of fact, he was paid about $120,000 to paint 20 murals in the late 20s and early 30s. He got his start painting in the American Museum of Natural History in New York. They have some huge murals of his there. They've actually just rehabbed a few of them. He's also in the Carnegie Museum in Pittsburgh, the National Museum in Washington, D.C. I think the National Zoo has some of his stuff. The zoo in not the zoo, but rather the David. La Brea Tar Pits, the museum, the Natural History Museum that's part of La Brea Tar Pits, also has some of his stuff. He also not only did paintings, but he did sculptures and all sorts of stuff. The guy is eminently famous, great. Look him up. You know, he's a interesting guy. He was actually almost blind. He didn't have good eyesight anyway, and when he was a little kid, he got hit in the eye with a stone, so he was doing most of his paintings with only one good eye, and that wasn't that good. This is the Cocoa Beach post office. Note, same plan, door, window, flat roof, constructed in 1939, and then ultimately repurposed as the headquarters of the Florida Historical Society. Now we have some Bahama shutters on there, but the building's still, once again, still in great shape. In Arcadia, which for those of you who don't know where that is, it's sort of near Sebring. The building, when I first saw the picture, I thought it was stone, but it's actually stucco and it's been painted. It's actually a different color now. That's the one building I've found so far that received from this arts program a bas-relief by Constance Ortmeyer. And it's hanging over the postmaster's door. Wish I could point. If you look at the window all the way to the right in these post offices, and some of you have obviously probably already been in these, and you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. That's the postmaster's office. So when you come in the front door and go through the storm door enclosure that they haven't, if you take a hard right, the postmaster's doors there, and they all look the same. They actually have the same wood, the same gold decals with the postmaster. It's sort of interesting. I don't know whether we have any here. I may have some in my other, but some of these, the murals were actually done off-site, so that when they came to the post office, they had to chop the bottom out of the mural to make it fit over the postmaster's door. So obviously here, but so if you're ever driving through Arcadia, stop at the post office and check this one out. This is up in Madison, which is way north, actually almost up on the Georgia border, I believe. But please note this one, same plan, but in this case, it could have come out of Colonial Williamsburg with the dental moldings and the Georgian features with the brick and the pitched roof and the half window over the door. Once again, original picture and currently, this has just been George Snow Hill painted. This is the mural that's in the Madison post office. It was actually just refurbished. There's an actual article just about this in the Living New Deal, on the Living New Deal site. That area, as I've said, is up against the Georgia border, so you had cotton growing up there at some point in time. But if you look at the picture on the right, that gives you exactly what the inside of most of these post offices look like. This could actually be the post office in LaGrange, Indiana, where I spent 37 years teaching. Same, identical, except the mural was of the Corn School, which was a harvest festival that we had every year in October. So pretty much the same. This is the Jasper post office, very similar to the others, except now we have a pitched roof. News from Afar, that's the mural that's in there. Note, I think this one was actually painted on the wall, and if you look really close, there's some cracks in it and some chipping. These, of course, most of these buildings were built prior to air conditioning, so the humidity was devastating. The ones that are on canvas, in other words, are actually in much better shape. Okay, now let's go to Fort Pierce. This is the second option. I think this went to the towns that were a little larger. This is obviously a beautiful building. It was the post office up until actually not too many years ago, and then it was sold to a retailer developer, and they rehabbed the entire building. I think it was supposed to be like one of those places where you went in, people rented stalls and had little shops and stuff like that. But once again, great building, 80 years old, still looking good. They have one of the really great, this was the one from Fort Pierce, Chief Osceola holding informal court with his chiefs. Lucille Lundquist Blanche was the artist for this. She was one of the most prolific of the WPA artists. About a third of the WPA artists were women. Let me see if I can pull numbers here. There were about 1,800 artists that completed murals for the project. And as I said, about a third of them, so 600 or so, were women. Blanche was very, as I said, prolific. She did this one, and I think at least 4, if not 5 others, mostly in the South, Tennessee, Virginia, and some other places. Obviously, this is beautiful. It was rehabbed. It's now hanging in the county building in Fort Pierce. But quite the artist. It's absolutely beautiful. If you're ever in the Fort Pierce area, go see it. This is going back north, but a little to the west is Perry. They've used the same post office plan as Fort Pierce. George Snow Hill, he's the same guy that did the long staple cotton for I think it was the Madison thing. This one has to, just as an aside, all of the part of the requirement for these murals was that they had to have a tie to the local history or local commerce or local industry. And that's why obviously logging was huge up in the north. One of the things that's interesting, let me go back here to talk a little bit about Blanche. There were competitions to do these. They weren't paid a lot of money, but for the time it was. Some as little as $300, as much as $1,000. And of course, during the Depression, that was a large sum of money. Blanche was very famous, and she was given a lot of leeway because she would actually submit. Most people were required to submit a small drawing of what they were going to do. She actually would make suggestions, and then she would wait until she moved in to the town and sort of would absorb the local culture, and then that would go into her creation of the local mural. The same thing, to go back once again to Sebring, Knight was actually here, and we have some local people whose parents or grandparents actually remembered going into the post office building and sitting and watching him paint and enjoying the experience of watching a great artist create. Let's see, Perry. This is now we change here. We're going to go to Miami Beach now. Of course, since it's Miami Beach, we have to get a little, frou-frou here. So this is the Miami Beach post office, which was constructed in 1937 in the Art Moderne style. The round building, the next picture shows you what that is. Fountain in the middle, and then we've got their murals by Charles Russell Hardman. Hardman also had painted one in Alabama. He only did a couple, but these are different episodes from Florida history, painted in 1940. A lot of these were right towards the end. When you're getting into 40, you're getting very close to World War II, when most of this stopped. Now let's jump back across to the Gulf and leave post offices behind for a little while. Remember I talked about the mayor of Sarasota going to Washington to get some money for some projects. This is, there were two large projects in Sarasota. The largest one being the Municipal Auditorium, which was built, note the dates here, July 37 to January of 38. So less than a year, opening in February of 38. The interesting thing about this, and this is a little segue to something else, I didn't include any of the CCC parks. The 8 original state parks in Florida were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. The interesting thing about the one in Sarasota, Myakka River State Park, is that the land that Myakka was on is part of the Palmer Estate. For any of you people who are from the Midwest, know that one of the great hotels in Chicago is the Palmer House, and was owned by Potter Palmer and his much younger wife, Bertha Honore Palmer, who was from New Orleans. And after Potter died, Bertha moved to Florida, actually built a house in Osprey, which is a little bit south of Sarasota, and purchased 80,000 acres of land and went from society queen to a cattle baron. Part of the land was actually purchased by her father's estate, the Honore estate in New Orleans. And so she was a cattle cattle rancher until she died. As we moved through the 20s and into the early 30s, the brothers, she had two sons, Honore Palmer and Potter Palmer Jr., and they were managing the land and developing, and they were willing to donate some land, about 2,000 acres, to the state. And at the same time, the Honore estate wanted to unload its share of the land because, as with many people during that time, property tax was an expense nobody wanted to deal with. So actually, they sold, I think it was 17,070 acres to the state of Florida for 37.5 cents an acre. And they let them pay for it over 5 years and told the state that they could use it for a park, and the money that they made from the park they could use to pay for it. So if we take that 17,000 acres, and then the Palmer boys donated 2,000 acres, we have 19,000, and then they were able to pick up another 8,000, the state was, people hadn't paid taxes. So Myakka started out with something approaching 30,000 acres, and was actually originally made as a state forest, for state forest, and they carved land out of that for the state park. I think the other thing that's interesting to note is that Thomas Reed Martin was a Chicago artist, and actually Bertha Palmer brought him down to Florida. So I think that sort of indicates what a presence she was, that she was able to show up in Florida, not just with all of her money, but also she brought her own architect. The fountain, as it's noted there, was designed by the architect's son. It doesn't look as good as the building now. These are current pictures. I like the one on the lower right is the Gulf side of the building. There was a big trend during the 30s to build buildings that sort of resembled liners. So you have all the great ocean liners that were built during the 1930s, the Normandy and the original Queen Elizabeth and Queen Mary. And this was actually, I think it's the Garden Club, but it was used as a community center on the backside of the auditorium. The scary part is, we'll talk a little bit later about one of the greatest structures in Sarasota that got torn down, and I'll tell you sort of a scary story when I was speaking to the Sarasota Historical Society about this building. Orlando, the current Camping World Stadium, began life as a very modest stadium. It's been rebuilt many, many, many times. Also note there that the original Orange Bowl in Miami was built by the WPA. This picture shows the lower left corner that's all that's left of the, this is obviously one of the rehabs of the stadium, but that is what's left of the original, stadium project from the WPA era. Port Jefferson, dry Tortugas. You Key West people should know this. If you've never gotten on the fast boat and gone out there and spent time snorkeling or scuba diving or picnicking, do it. It's a great trip. I've done it several times, and it's wonderful. Fort Jefferson originally was built as Fort Monroe after the War of 1812. You historian people realize that, there was the Great Battle of New Orleans, where the British had run blockades and run their ships in. So Fort Monroe was built on the dry Tortugas Keys to protect the southern ports and the shipping lanes. It had many, many iterations and many lives. It was used as a hospital, became a coaling station during the Spanish-American War. We'll have an aerial view here in a minute where you can see where the coral was blasted out to be able to get giant, first the coal ships, which had a very deep draft, and then also the battleships and other large ships from the Spanish-American War into the thing. FDR was fascinated. FDR spent a lot of time in Florida during his presidency because of his polio. He actually had a houseboat called a Scirocco, which he would go and spend time, especially in the winter. This was partially before he bought Warm Springs, because he felt that the warm water down here made his legs feel better. And so he was really loved Florida. And so one of the very first things he did was to turn this into a national monument. And it wasn't in really great shape. And so he sent the WPA down to renovate the structure. And then later on, it was made into a national park. And for those of you who've been down there, notice that one, I think it's Loggerhead Key, that's what it says here, is a bird sanctuary, and you can actually see all the birds and stuff over there. I don't think you can actually go over there. You can sit out in your boat and watch, but I don't think you're supposed to get on the key. Somebody can tell me if I'm wrong on that one. Here's a picture. Upper right is how nasty it looked before the WPA got in there and fixed it up. Lower left is an aerial view. You can see the coaling dock down at the bottom, which is deteriorating, and then the nice azure blue where they blasted the ability to get ships up in here. The Fort Jefferson is obviously most famously known as the place where Dr. Mudd, the infamous Dr. Mudd, the poor doctor who was innocent and set John Wilkes Booth's leg after Booth jumped from the presidential box after he'd assassinated Lincoln. And he rode off with his buddies and showed up at Mudd's house out in the country. Mudd had not heard anything about the Lincoln assassination. He just had a guy that showed up with a broken leg, and he fixed it. He avoided hanging. They hung, I believe, 4 of the other conspirators, including the poor lady who was the mother of one of the conspirators, and her only sin was that she owned the house where they met to plan that. But she was actually, I think she was the first woman who was ever hung for treason in America. Mudd later redeemed himself by treating victims during the yellow fever epidemic, and so he was let out, and he didn't end up serving his whole time in prison. St. Augustine, of course, one of our great old Spanish cities in Florida, received some WPA help in one of its many reconstructions. The Gates project, I think it may be done now, but several years ago they were doing another rehab of that. I don't know whether that speaks to the fact that this stuff is just really old and it's not an original construction of the WPA. One of the other things that the WPA did was to create drawings of some of the historic projects that they were working on. My father was a civil engineer, and he would have looked at this and called this an as-built, where you would go in and you'd make a plan of a building that you didn't have a plan of. And that was one of the side, projects of the WPA, was to take care of this. That also, once again, another aside, the records project, this was part of that too. That was a really great project that people don't even know happened. But if it wasn't for the records project, I mean, they invented microfiche. Of course, we don't worry about that now, but back in the day, that was a magical thing, and really were behind upgrading the National Archive and a lot of stuff during the WPA era. Okay, what's going on here? We're supposed to be going to the next slide. Let's do it this way. Another connection problem.
Hi guys, David seems to be having another connection issue, so I'm going to go ahead and give him another call, and we'll give him a couple more moments to log back in.
We are. I apologize. For those of you who don't know, we only have one halfway decent internet. Okay. Please, God, let this not happen again. For those of you who don't know, back in the 20s, Florida had a whole bunch of very, very large counties. And starting in about 1925, 22, 23, 25, those were all broken up. Martin County, which is due north of Palm Beach County, was carved out of there. There's a school there that was built in 1908, turned into Martin County Courthouse. WPA came in and did that, whipped it out in not very much time at a very cheap cost. They even left the courthouse misspelling on there. Okay, not just buildings. You have to remember that in certain parts of the country, there were other construction venues and projects that went on. In the East Coast, of course, shipbuilding was one. The WPA funded the Coast Guard cutter Mohawk, which was built and launched, I believe, in Maryland in 1934. It was used during World War II and then actually sold around and became a museum. I was doing a presentation down, as a matter of fact, it may have been in the Keys. I think it was in Isla Mirada, and a guy came up and told me he had actually worked as a docent on this ship when it was a museum in Staten Island. In 2012, they brought it down here and they sunk it in the Gulf off of Fort Myers so it can serve as a artificial reef, and now it's the Mohawk Veterans Memorial Reef, popular dive site. You guys have great diving down there. You get up north in the Gulf and there's not much out there to see, so now the Mohawk is attracting fish and growing corals and is a nice dive site. So, let's get down to you guys. One of you have several buildings. I'm just going to focus on a couple here. This is a Key West Aquarium, and it was actually built with FARA dollars. Two things happened to you guys, and I'm probably telling you history you already know. During the late 20s and early 30s, Key West was not in really great shape. And so there was an effort made to sort of upgrade the community, and that's why they were able to use the FARA dollars, Federal Emergency Relief Act dollars. One of the buildings that was built was the Key West Aquarium. Also, more money flew in, even though you guys didn't get hit by the Great Labor Day Hurricane in 1935. That did help money flow into the Keys for construction. This is a great story, and some of you Keys people down there, if you've been there for a long time, can try to explain this to me. Alfredo Crimi, Italian American, was a really great painter, and he painted these two wonderful murals in the Key West Aquarium. Apparently, at some point in time, they were either painted over, or something happened or destroyed them. So the ones that are there, I have been told, are reproductions. So if someone wants to leave us a note about what happened to the real ones. He also, as you can see, was as prolific as the lady from Fort Pierce, and he has murals once again all over the country. He got some great paintings. Look him up on Google him later on and get a chance to see some of the great things that he done. Now we're going to move on to this is my favorite part of Key West. And the old Key West High School, which became Archer Elementary and now is the City Hall, was built by the WPA, and it received 2 murals painted by William Hoffman in 1936. The picture on the upper right is actually the Isle of Bones. I've also seen this called Arrival in Key West, but I'm going to go with Isle of Bones because you can see the skull down at the bottom. This is a picture of the mural when it was still in the school, and I'm assuming it was Archer Elementary as they were getting ready to rehab it into the City Hall. I taught for 37 years, and the fact that this thing made it through a high school and an elementary school for as many years as it did without some graffiti written on the bottom of it is beyond belief. So either they had an incredibly strict administration, or the kids really were appreciating this. So this shows what it looked like before they restored these 2 murals. This is what they look like after the restoration. The one on the right, of course, is the Isle of Bones. This is actually one of my favorite, outside, of course, the one in Sebring, my favorite Florida murals, because it reminds me of some other artists that I'm really fond of. N.C. Wyeth has that sort of, he did all those incredible illustrations for. You can't see me. Incredible illustrations for the Scribner's Classics, and I love those paintings, and so this reminded me of that. And then the other one, of course, is the construction of the Overseas Railroad of Flagler, and of course eventually became the Overseas Highway. Here, this is one of the great losses. The second, after the key, we've only got 6 minutes here. Let's go. This is a Lido Beach casino that was built in Sarasota, in Lido Beach, which of course is north of St. Armand's Island on the Gulf. You can see it was an incredible structure. Casino in the European sense, in that had a ballroom, shops, restaurants, bars. Incredible building. The great carvings that had been made by artists that were participating in the WPA arts project, and a swimming pool hidden sort of behind that frontage there, and then the cabanas on either side. In 1969, it was completely demolished. I did a presentation for the Sarasota Historical Society, and a couple people there told me that they just came in one night and it was the next morning it was gone. If you look at the next picture, you can see that there was some beach erosion that was starting to happen. I've been told that 1940 to 1969, so it was only 30 years old, but it already needed some help. And there was a belief by some of the local people that it wasn't quite up to the standard that Sarasota wanted to present to the world, and so they came in and tore it down. The pool still exists, and there's a sort of a pole barn building next to that was supposed to replace this. But great structure. It's really sad. The other thing that came up when I was doing that presentation is there was talk at the time that they were wanted to tear down the auditorium because it wasn't, as a venue, it was competing with some of the newer hotels, and they wanted to get rid of it. So let's keep our fingers crossed that that doesn't happen. Here's some of the 182, that needs to be changed to 209. Some of the other things here, when you're driving north, when A1A splits coming south into Isla Mirada, there's the Hurricane Memorial that talks about the memorial to the deaths of the people from the great Labor Day hurricane that swept through there. We're going to talk just a little bit more about that if I have a chance, have time. The Overseas Highway, remember that was built even after Flagler built the railroad. People wanted to drive down, so the highway was being built. I'm probably not telling you anything that you don't already know. There were some of the places, obviously, 7 Mile Bridge and some of that. There were ferries that ran back and forth. And then after that, the bridges, 7 Mile Bridge, I think, was converted from a railroad bridge into a highway bridge, and the rest of the thing was finished. Cherry Lake community is a fascinating thing. If you want to spend some time looking at that, it was pure socialism. Government came in, wanted to get people out of the cities during the Depression, so they built this incredible farm community, actually up almost on the Georgia border, but they forgot to teach the people that moved there how to farm. So it took a little time. They became an artisan community. It was developed, interesting, and then when World War II started, all the men left and everybody else, and now what's left is a scout camp. Airports, there's many airports built. The only ones that still exist are Tampa and the Bradenton, Sarasota, and part of the reason they still exist is because they were built on land, had enough land, and then the government came in as World War II started, added to, and so as the cities grew, they didn't encroach on the airports. So now the Tampa Airport also too has some absolutely incredible murals. If you fly through the Tampa Airport, I think it's in the Delta terminal, there's all these incredible murals that have to do with the history of flight. Once again, we mentioned the parks, the CCC parks, the 8 original CCC parks, some of the other buildings. Unfortunately, the district office in Tallahassee, of all the buildings, was destroyed. Now, what happened? How was all this paid for? What people don't realize is that most of the New Deal programs were paid for out of the War Department budget. And that didn't set well with the military establishment. There's a story, maybe apocryphal, that Douglas MacArthur and FDR got in a huge disagreement about this. But as we approached the end of the 30s, the war had already started in Europe, and the United States had started its Lend-Lease program with England, and Congress just didn't want to spend the money. The arts, the major cultural programs had already collapsed before this time, and there was less and less money wanting to go into that. And then, of course, we get to Pearl Harbor in December of 1941, and that pretty much shut down everything. Now, projects were not dropped, so they were finished. If you had something in the works, it was finished. And of course, the workforce was depleted as the men went off to war. So that made it that much more difficult to get things finished. Once again, we're at 2,209. The things that I think are really important to look at this is what this did, a testament to that time when we were able to pull our self up bootstraps. If you don't know, the CCC enrollees were paid $30 a month, $1 a day. and $25 of that got sent home directly to their families. And we know now that about 20 million Americans were saved from hunger and starvation because of that $25 that went home. But then we don't have figures on the money from the WPA projects, the wages from those, and how many people were saved by those jobs, or then learned skills that they were able to carry on during the war or after. The other thing I think is really important, and I've stressed this over and over again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but these buildings are all 80 years and plus years old, and most of them have been repurposed. They're still in good shape. They were built fast, but it attests to the foresightedness and the talent that went into constructing those. Now, as we well know, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was doing this to pull the country out of the Depression. Did he contemplate what would happen afterwards? Probably not, but I'm sure he'd still take credit for it, because FDR was anything but humble, for those of you who study him. So I thought we'd end this with, this is a picture of the Fdr Memorial in Washington, D.C. The upper right is the original Fdr Memorial. For those of you who are old enough to remember when this was done, I remember there was a huge discussion as to, do we show him in his wheelchair or don't we show him in his wheelchair? And the solution was to put his incredible cape on him that he wore. There's a whole cape story I can fill you in at some other time. And there's Falla, his little Scotty dog, that's actually buried in the Franklin and Eleanor buried in the Rose Garden at Hyde Park, and Falla has his own separate grave. And then later this was added to, and we have some other pictures of some of the things showing the guy listening to the fireside chats, and then people lined up for jobs in the Depression. So I think my time is up. I ran over by 2 minutes. I'm willing to stay if you guys have some questions. I think we're going to moderate those to answer them, but you guys have been great. I'm sorry that we lost power there twice, but that I was able to get it back. So I'm done.
Thank you. We do have 2 questions.
Okay.
So the first one, Rebecca says, I read that Fort Jefferson was the largest brick building in the world. So is it the largest brick building?
If she said it, it could be. I don't know. I've never actually looked into that. I know it's brick. I actually believe I have some souvenir brick pieces from there. I'm a big rock collector when I go places. I hate to admit this to the public and God, but I actually was able to sneak a brick out of Pompeii when I was there one time. So, anyway, so yeah, that sounds, I can't think of anything else that would be brick. And that the reason that probably is true is, remember, everything that built that fort had to be transported out there by boat, and bricks are much easier to transport than great big giant blocks of stone. And they're actually, you couldn't have done a redoubt with the dirt like the Fort Fort DeSoto in Tampa is south of St. Pete is built out of dirt, but you don't even have any dirt out there to do that. So brick sounds great to me.
All right, and then our next question is, was the Key West Federal Building a WPA project, and are there any others?
Yes, there are other Key West buildings. I think you've filled me in. You could probably answer that question better than I can. What I didn't do is we actually have one more slide maybe we have one more slide. Oh, there we go. This is the actual be all and end all, the livingnewdeal.org So if you guys, I get my information from these people, and then I do separate research. So if you have other buildings in Key West that were WPA buildings, you can actually go to this and you can make a submission, and then they do the research, and then it gets added to Florida's list. So you could actually do a scavenger hunt. I remember when I was up in Lake City, they didn't even have any buildings that were in the list, and there was a very small group of people, and we were at the library, and a couple of the older people there were saying, "Wait a minute, my grandfather worked on that bridge out west of town, and there's a plaque on there that says the WPA built that." And then I suggested, I said, well, maybe you guys need to do a scavenger hunt and then add things to the New Deal site. So go, if you haven't gone to the city county building and seen those murals, please do that. They're beautiful. Until you've seen one of those, the fact that, once again, those are 80 years old, and some of them were not maintained like you would normally maintain great art in a museum, and they're still in pretty good shape. So take advantage of the fact. Also, jokingly, Sloppy Joe's bar has a painting in there that was actually painted by a WPA artist of Ernest Hemingway, I think, playing cards. And so you can go in there and check that out too. That's by an artist, but it's not a WPA, so don't assume that Sloppy Joe's got a WPA project back in the 30s.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and end for the day since we're almost about 10 minutes over. Thank you again to everybody for joining us this evening. So since this is a Florida Humanities Talk, they have requested that we send a survey out to you guys. So as soon as we end this program, that survey should pop up on your screen. If you would like to fill it out but don't have time at the moment, there'll be a thank you email that will be coming through that will also include the link to that survey.
Also, something else, if you guys enjoyed this, please write your state legislators and tell them how much you enjoyed this, because that's where some of the humanities funding comes from. And in the last budget, all the humanities funding was cut completely. So use your power as a citizen to let them know that that wasn't a great idea, and maybe we need to have the money back.
Exactly. All right, so as a lot of you know, Quaz celebrates the Tennessee Williams birthday celebration during this month. So we have a bunch of different events taking place. If you would like to participate in the poetry or short story contest, that ends on Sunday. Our next Happy Hour with Historian will take place on Wednesday, and that will be about Tennessee Williams in Key West. And then join us on March 18th for Presidents in Florida, which will be another Florida Humanities Talk. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful evening. And if you have any additional questions, follow up, please email me, and I can forward these all to David. All right, have a great evening, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks, guys.